Hello World History class, it's Mr. Walker, and today I'm going to help you with your quiz if you're having trouble. I'm going to go through it question by question and push you toward the right responses. And today's quiz is about the atom bomb. And so you had reading yesterday from a textbook, also from survivors of the bomb, and I also put up two videos for you to watch. One was a 4-minute video with survivors of from Hiroshima, and as well as interviews with pilots who were on the Enola Gay, the ship, the bomber that dropped the atom bomb, the first one called Little Boy, and also had recreations of the event. And then there were several other videos, if you wanted to, that were documentaries and showed evidence and footage of the atomic bomb. And so here we go. I'm going to look at here's the quiz you're taking. And whose decision was it to drop the atom bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? This is the first question. Well, the only person who has the capability of it was the President of the United States. Why? Because the United States was the only nation with the bomb in 1945, although the Russians had spies in the Manhattan Project who were able to get the information to Moscow, and so Stalin knew about it. But the U.S. was the only one who had a bomb at that time. So it was a U.S. president, and by the time the bomb was used, FDR had died. The president who was elected, who almost served 4 terms after his death. This is when the amendment was passed that limits presidents to 2 terms. Before then, it had just been a norm, and when FDR left office, it became law that you could only have 2 terms. But anyway, it's the president after Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Okay, the name of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, I already said it, I think within the first minute or so. So listen for that. All right, this next question is based on this chart that I took from a textbook. Here's the chart, but before you look at the chart, let's look at the question to see what it's asking. So based on the chart below, in addition to the 70,000 people who died immediately in the Hiroshima bombing, see this, my mouse, 70,000 people killed immediately. How many more people died as a result of their injuries and exposure to the bomb? And so this is a little math problem. And so, 70,000 people died immediately. How many people, in addition to these 70,000, died afterwards because of exposure? Because of, so people died of cancer, people died of radiation sickness, people died of burns, people died from injuries suffered from debris. And so how many total people were killed? So look at the total number of people and then subtract those who were killed immediately. So you have 200,000 total deaths related to the atom bomb in Hiroshima alone, in this one city. Subtract 70,000, those who died immediately. So how many people died, basically suffered and died as a result of that? That's the question I'm asking here. At least when I first learned about the atom bomb, I did not realize how many people died afterward. I knew that a lot of people died during it. 70,000 people immediately died, but then as a result of the injuries, you have 200,000 total people. So even if you may have survived the initial blast, there's still over 100,000 people who would not survive it later. And the same thing happens 3 days later in Nagasaki when the second bomb is dropped. Okay, according to that chart, did the United States show mercy on Japan after dropping the Hiroshima bomb that killed over 200,000 civilians? And so in the reading, so did the US stop aggression against Japan after the Hiroshima bomb? Or no, did they drop another bomb on another Japanese city? That's the question there. I want you to be thinking about this decision to drop to after you've destroyed an entire a city of 100,000 men, women, and children, of civilians, meaning it's not a military target. How then 3 days later you could do the same on a different city? According to the film, what happened to people who were directly under the bomb's blast? And so I'd like you to look at that film, and you'll find it. And that's the 4-minute film on Hiroshima. And the narrator says what happens to people who were directly under the bomb's blast. Also in that same film, the airmen, the men who were flying the plane, how did they respond when they were asked about how they felt about being in that plane that dropped an atom bomb on a city of civilians? You can hear their testimony. And they were, some were said how proud they were, but others, as they were saying that, one of the men says, you have no idea how it felt, and he gets very upset about being asked that question. You can tell that he's thought about it a lot, and it's an emotionally difficult question for him. Let's see. And so here's a phrase that I came up with for this next question. The new technological horror of World War I was fought with chemistry, while that of the Second World War was fought with physics. And so what technology from World War I was a result of chemistry? It was a horrible new weapons technology that we learned about. And there's a face of a man that's been almost melted away that we looked at when we studied World War I. What was the technology that was made in a chemistry lab that caused his suffering and death? And now, what is the new technology from World War II that rather being made in a chemistry lab, it was made by, thought up by mathematicians, by physicists? So there are two answers to click here. What is the one made by chemistry in World War I, and then what is the weapon made by physics? And so for this, I want you to think about how, while chemistry and physics have done wonders of human progress for technology, it also has served to technology. The other side is that it can also harm us in extreme ways. And who is the Jewish German scientist who escaped from Nazi Germany and wrote a letter to President Roosevelt persuading him that the Americans needed to build a super weapon capable of splitting an atom before the Nazis were able to develop one first? And so part of what we have learned and what we'll go over again tomorrow during the Holocaust, when Jews were kicked out of their jobs in Nazi Germany, there's one of the most famous scientists in the world. And this scientist came up with the idea, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, of this E equals mc squared. That scientist, Albert Einstein, this was in 1905 that he came up with this idea, along with these two other ideas. One was relativity, and the other was of space-time. And this was it was his miracle year in 1905, that E stands for energy, and M is mass, C is a constant. And so if you have a little bit of mass times that constant squared, it's going to release a huge amount of energy. And so within an atom is a huge amount of energy. And so this theoretical idea, this idea that you could split an atom, there would be huge amounts of energy released. This was, Einstein was brainstorming this and came up with this theory in Germany in the early 1900s, and 40 years later, it had been weaponized. And so when he was kicked out of Germany, he knew that the scientists were working on this and working to weaponize it. And so he wrote a letter to President Roosevelt warning him that the Germans were going to use this idea of mathematics in order to create a super weapon, and that the United States should make theirs first. What reasoning does the textbook give to justify using the atomic bomb to kill hundreds of thousands of Japanese civilians? And so here, the textbook says that that after Okinawa, the next stop for the Allies had to be Japan. President Truman's advisors had informed him that an invasion of the Japanese homeland might cost the Allies 500,000 lives. Truman had to make a decision whether to use a powerful new weapon called the atomic bomb or A-bomb. Much of his advisors felt that using it would bring the war to the quickest possible end. And so what reason are they giving here why Truman should use the A-bomb? Was it that the U.S. military had spent $2 billion and they needed to justify their expense? Was it the U.S. government's racism toward Japanese people justified killing them because of their subhuman status? Would an invasion of Japan likely lead to the deaths of 500,000 American troops? Or did the U.S. want to demonstrate to the Soviet Union the destructive power of their new weapon in order to negotiate? And so here, actually, all of these claims are historically valid. However, only one of them is talked about in this textbook. And so which one did I just read that was in the textbook? So this is not asking for which of the statements is true. They're all true. Which one is the only one that the textbook includes? Okay. What part of the United States did most of the nuclear testing take place? It took place in New Mexico. And so you need to figure out what part of the United States is New Mexico, at Alamo Gordo, New Mexico. Is that the northeast of the United States, the southeast, the northwest, or the southwest? So where is New Mexico? Even though it was called the Manhattan Project, and Manhattan's in New York, and there were operations in Tennessee and in Washington State, the major tests happened in New Mexico. And so that's the part of the United States you want to look for. Based on the reading above, who is J. Robert Oppenheimer? And this is this reading right here. And so if you look here, there's Robert Oppenheimer. And the bomb had been developed by the top secret Manhattan Project. Finish reading this, and you will figure out who J. Robert Oppenheimer is. Okay. Here, this is a quote from J. Robert Oppenheimer after the successful test of the bomb. And he wrote in his diary, "I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him, takes on his multi-armed form and says, 'Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.' I suppose we all thought that one way or another." What is the best reason for why Oppenheimer gave this quote? Why is he writing about a story from the Hindu Holy Scripture? And so here, was he a Buddhist and wanted to honor his religion after he created a new weapon? Is that why he's making this statement? Is he trying to impress people by showing off his knowledge of Eastern religions? Remember, he's writing in a diary, so is he trying to impress people? Was he awed and disgusted by the explosion and trying to communicate his shock and disbelief and horror that the makers of the bomb felt? Or is it impossible to know why anyone would say anything at any time? Please don't answer this one, because that's our job to try to figure that out, to analyze. And so here, make your best response. Okay. This is from a historian named Ronald Takaki, who taught at UC Berkeley, and he just died in 2009. And he wrote a book called Hiroshima, Why Americans Dropped the Atom Bomb, which, unlike our textbook, he studies the idea of how racism may have played a part in the U.S. dropping the bomb. And so which phrase best suggests that Truman had racist beliefs toward the Japanese people? And so this is a quote from the secondary source of Takaki's book, where he quotes Truman. And so on August 8th, after he'd been urged to destroy Japan completely, Truman responded soberly in a private letter. Soberly, think of sober, not being drunk. It's someone who's thinking clearly. And this is a private letter. And so because it's a private letter, we can assume that it demonstrates his true thoughts. And so Truman wrote, "I know that Japan is a terribly cruel and uncivilized nation in warfare, but I can't bring myself to believe that because they are beasts, we should ourselves act in that same manner. For myself, I certainly regret the necessity of wiping out whole populations because of the pig-headedness of leaders of a nation. And for your information, I am not going to do it unless absolutely necessary. My object is to save as many American lives as possible, but I also have a humane feeling for the women and children in Japan. So this is in a letter that Truman wrote. And so which phrase best suggests that he may have had racist beliefs toward the Japanese people? Cruel and uncivilized nation in warfare? Is this talking about the people, or is it talking about, this seems to be conditional, meaning it says they're cruel and uncivilized nation, Japan, in warfare. Pig-headedness of the leaders of a nation, does this mean that all Japanese people are, does he have racist beliefs toward all Japanese people? Here, I have a humane feeling toward the women and children in Japan. Does that show racism of our president? Or does this, they are beasts? Which one of these best describes a racist attitude that the President of the United States may have felt toward Japanese? On the other hand, I want you in this next question to say, what is proof that Truman also had sympathetic feelings toward the Japanese people? So this is how a person can be complicated, where they can have both racist and non-racist beliefs simultaneously. And so here, what's the evidence that Truman has racist beliefs toward the Japanese? And here, what also shows his uncertainty and that he is thinking of the Japanese as fellow human beings and what he's about to do to be something horrible. Okay, these are different quotes in this next question from people who survived the atom bomb, from a businessman whose son was killed, a third grade girl, a 19-year-old girl, a first grade girl, and they are all talking about what they witnessed in Hiroshima, those that survived immediately. And we know that 130,000 of them are eventually going to die who did survive the initial blast. And so based on this, on these quotes from these different survivors, and this is from Richard Rhodes's book, the Americans dropped the bomb on a military target to destroy the Japanese army. So are these examples of soldiers talking about military targets being destroyed? Did the Americans drop the bomb on an unpopulated area in order to demonstrate the destructive force of the weapon? So is this an example of the bomb, of people witnessing the bomb and being awed and shocked by it and scared about its power, but not hurting people? Or is this the Americans dropped a bomb on a civilian target in order to destroy and horrify men, women, and children? And so take a look at this. Has the bomb landed on a civilian target and destroyed and horrified men, women, and children? Okay, based on the following text, how did nations react over time under the discovery of the use of the first atomic bomb? And so I'm asking you to read this and think to yourself, is this what's going to happen with the atom bomb? So this excerpt, and this is from our textbook, says, just as in World War I, the conflicts of World War II spurred the development of ever more powerful weapons. Mightier tanks, more elusive submarines, faster fighter planes, all emerged from this period. From ancient times to the present day, the pattern remains the same. Every new weapon causes other countries to develop weapons of similar or greater force. This pattern results in a deadly race for an ultimate weapon. For example, the atom bomb, the atomic bomb. But once the atomic bomb is created, does it stop there? That's my question. Based on this pattern, do we have the atom bomb and is that it after 1945? Or does our weapons technology somehow stop? Is this the end point? And so here, were all atomic weapons immediately destroyed and banned after World War II? Were many more nations, did they develop the same type of atomic weapons today that we created in World War II? Or have nations developed even more dangerous atomic weapons that are bigger, faster, and more destructive? Based on this pattern, what do you think is most likely to have happened since the first atom bomb was created? And so this answers that question. This is an article from December 27th, 2019, so just a few months ago. In this article, it's from Moscow. A new intercontinental weapon that can fly 27 times the speed of sound became operational Friday, Russia's defense minister reported to President Vladimir Putin, bolstering the country's nuclear strike capability. Putin has described the Avangard hypersonic glide vehicle as a technological breakthrough comparable with the 1957 Soviet launch of the first satellite. The new Russian weapon and a similar system being developed in China have troubled the United States, which has pondered defense strategies. The Avangard is launched atop an intercontinental ballistic missile, but unlike a regular missile warhead that follows a predictable path after the separation, it can make sharp movements in the atmosphere en route to target, making it much harder to intercept. And so here's some questions about this article. What is this nation that has developed a new form of atomic weapon? Based on this. And based on that article, how fast can the new missile travel? You're going to have to do a little math with a calculator in miles per hour. So the speed of sound, Mach 1, is 767.23 miles per hour. So how fast does this rocket go? It goes 27 times the speed of sound. You're going to have to multiply 767 times 27 in order to figure out the answer here. So what's 767 times 27? It's one of these. This rocket goes tens of thousands of miles per hour. According to the article, what country besides Russia is also developing a similar type of hypersonic missile? So in that article that we just read, there's another nation that's also developing, according to that article, another hypersonic nuclear weapon. And then what makes this type of weapon difficult to intercept? This was in the last sentence. Is it its speed that makes it hard to intercept? Is it that it doesn't fly along a predictable trajectory? Is it because it's so destructive it's impossible to counterstrike? Or are American missiles unable to produce a counterstrike of similar strength? Which is close to C. What's the only nation on Earth? So given that there is a proliferation or a spread of nuclear weapons, who is the only nation to have used atomic weapons in warfare? And it's only been used once in 1945. Knock on wood. And that's the end of my support for you for this quiz. All right. I hope you learned a lot more today while taking this quiz. And this is a frightening idea about atomic weapons, and I hope that you're gaining appreciation for the power and destructiveness of it and how we need to be very engaged with the world and with our own leaders when it comes to this technology that has the ability to wipe us all off the face of the earth. All right, with that, have a great Tuesday. Okay, bye.